Hi, everybody. Welcome to the IC Topic Chats for today, February 5th, 2026. This is our annual core topic on niche. Yep, you heard me say that right, and you may disagree with the way I say it, but we're going to cover that in a couple minutes. Um, but the general idea is how do we identify what we're going to focus our work on our efforts, and how is that going to be? We're going to say yes to the right things and say no to the things that may be a distraction or may not be fulfilling our big idea. And so we're going to get into that in a little bit. The I I did this last. I usually do this as the first session of the year when I talk about why you might want to be an independent consultant. And I forgot to do it a month ago. So I want to make a point to say, and I do this every year. I talk with a lot of privilege. There's a lot of privilege bestowed upon me as just an individual, and I'm often unaware of that privilege. And I bring that to this conversation that we have through the IC topic chats. And I want to take a step back and just acknowledge that. Um, you'll hear me say things like "you can," and I'm taking that from the perspective because I did. I think you can, and I do believe that to be the case. And I believe that if you look around at the other people who participate in these IC topic chats, who are involved with the independent consulting TIG, and people who are successful, we represent a wide variety of people. But I do want to say, as a white man, uh, I'm white, male, Midwestern, business owner with a PhD, and a lot of other things that I'm not even familiar with. I think I've been given opportunities that I often don't always acknowledge and are aware of. But I do want to say I'm trying to always be aware of these things. And I also want to say that I think we all have privilege because we're here today. And so that's my take on it. I'm trying to acknowledge that the way I perceive things is in a very positive way that's focused on people growing and developing. And sometimes I might not understand your perspective, but I want to say that to the degree I can, I want to acknowledge that. All right, next step. Now, um, in the past 2 years, I've read a little passage from this book called "Discipline is Destiny." It's by Ryan Holiday, and he may be my favorite author right now, even though he's about 20 years younger than me, which is like, how can this guy know so much? And he does. It's unbelievable. Anyway, so I've read probably the first couple pages of a chapter called "Keep the main thing." And it's so appropriate for our conversation today on niche. So I'm going to play about 2 minutes of the beginning of this chapter. Now, just a backstory. This is Stoicism, Stoic philosophy. There's When I first heard about Stoic philosophy, I thought it was like grumpy old men who, you know, were sober and boring, right? But as I've learned more and more about Stoic philosophy, my little discussion on this, Stoic philosophy is really about um, understanding the control that you have in the world and having a good attitude about these things. Um, there's four main principles of the Stoic philosophy idea. This is not religious. It won't be if you're interested in Stoic philosophy. You're not going to say that, well, this doesn't comply with my Christian or other kind of perspectives. This is philosophy. This is how to live your life. But the four main ones are about discipline, which is one of his four books, courage, um, education or knowledge, and about justice. And those are the four cardinal principles. But anyway, that's an aside. But I do want to start off this idea about niche by playing this 2 minutes.
Keep the main thing. Booker T. Washington was a busy man. He ran the Tuskegee Institute, which he founded. He traveled constantly to speak to crowds and meet with donors. He lobbied legislators, gave lectures, led fundraising campaigns, and published 5 books. How did he manage it all? It wasn't just endurance and hustle and energy. It was also the discipline to say the dreaded word, no. The number of people who stand ready to consume one's time to no purpose, he said, is almost countless. Some thought him aloof, some thought him selfish. They said things behind his back he was too busy to notice. He knew that the main thing in life was to keep the main thing, especially when your main thing is uplifting an entire race of people. But what is the main thing for the rest of us? That is the main question. If you don't know the answer, how can you possibly know what to say yes to and what to say no to? How can you know what to show up to, what to wake up early for, what to practice, what to endure? You can't. You're winging it. You're vulnerable to every shiny, exciting thing that comes your way. Every I've got a potential opportunity for you. Every it'll only take a minute. Every thanks in advance. Every I know you're busy, but anyone who has not groomed his life in general towards some definite end cannot possibly arrange his actions properly. The writer Montaigne reminded himself. If you don't know where you're sailing, the Stoics said, no wind is favorable. This means first the discipline to step away and think, what am I doing? What are my priorities? What's the most important contribution I can make to my work, to my family, to the world? And then comes the discipline to ignore just about everything else. Because Booker T.
All right, so hopefully that was interesting for you. I think that's a good setup to the conversation about niche. And so here's some other books that I'm going to reference. So by the way, if you're interested in Ryan Holiday, I highly recommend looking into it. If you type Ryan Holiday in to any web search, a lot of books are going to pop up. This is one of them. You'll also see there's an opportunity for Stoic philosophy of the day. So he has something, an email that goes out every day, which I receive. I read 75% of them. And there's a lot of other things that are opportunities out there. I think it's a great way to orient yourself. And it has been very helpful for me and all the different troubles I've run into over time. But it's definitely been helpful in thinking about what our conversation is today, which is niche. Other books, How to Ikigai, that's philosophy. Good to Great is primarily where I get a lot of these thoughts about niche. And The Toilet Paper Entrepreneur, which is kind of a silly book, but it's also got a serious element to it by Michael Michalowicz. And you'll see him a lot in the entrepreneur world. The word niche, okay, you hear me saying it. The one thing I want to say here is there's a lot of different ways to say it. There's a debate about how you're supposed to pronounce niche. There are two common pronunciations. If you look at all the different things that are on here, you'll say either way is correct. Both niche and niche are okay. That's the general reference. So when people say, "Hey, Matt, you're saying it wrong," no, I'm not. But I'm not going to judge you for saying it like the Knights of Niche or the Knights of Knee. Oh, they're coming off there. Look at that. That's crazy. Here's some other perspectives on that. But I think I'm probably with Harold when I say I just try and say nothing. But that's not true. I will say if you end up in a church and you see a little alcove that is a niche, that's usually the way I hear it pronounced. I've not heard people refer to that as a niche, but I'm sure you guys will tell me I'm wrong. If you're thinking about Mean Girls, you're probably thinking about, well, it's a niche or a niche. And with what we're talking about today, we're going to call this a hedgehog concept. All right. Or the way I pronounce it is niche, but hedgehog concept is where we're going with this. So when you start talking about your niche, you first want to stop and think, who do I want to serve, right? Who are those people? Who are the people that I want to spend time with? Who I like and who like me in return? Oftentimes these are people that we went to grad school with. They are the client. These are the clients that we're looking for. The people that see and value you for the work that you can do with them, for them, in collaboration with them. Next piece is, what are those types of services that I can offer, right? For us as program evaluators, independent consultants, usually that's along those lines of the research perspectives that we apply towards an evaluation of a program or of a project or of a organization. And there's a whole literature. A lot of people will talk about how you go about doing that program evaluation. That's the rest of AEA. Here we're just talking about what are those services that you may want to offer. And then you want to think about how do you want to spend your time, which brings us to this hedgehog concept. Okay. The hedgehog concept, on the left, you'll see a hedgehog. Now, hedgehogs are, this is a bit like the turtle and the the um the turtle and the all mixed up with my head. And the rabbit. The rabbit and the turtle, or the hare and the tortoise idea. The hedgehog concept is a bit of the same idea, where you've got a fox and a hedgehog. Now, the fox is very sly, it's very fast, it darts from place to place, but oftentimes the fox moves without concept of what it's doing. It's not really, this is taken from old uh, the old phrase from a Greek poet, the fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing. And so in Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, he talks about the hedgehog having this very concentrated perspective that moves in a very direct way. And when attacked, it can stop, it can curl up in a ball and protect itself, right? Whereas the fox moves without a lot of purpose. It moves, it darts around from thing to thing. And so when we're talking about niche or hedgehog concept, we want to identify the one big thing that we're focused on, and we stay focused on it with a lot of discipline and not be, so we would want to be more like hedgehogs than foxes. So let me put this in a different way. So we often end up with these overlapping circles. So you start with what you love, and a lot of us have these things from why we pursued our master's degrees or how we found ourselves in the career that we loved, right? So, what is that thing that you love with regards to your career? For me, it has always been working with um, educators and in college and with um, K-12 folks. Um, but I have always loved education. I particularly loved higher education, which is where I pursued my PhD. I focused my PhD is I got a PhD in education focusing on education. I got a college degree in college. Literally, I researched research at colleges. That's what I love. And I'm particularly good at data analysis. It wasn't something that I ever sought out for myself, but at a young age, my father showed me how to do work in Lotus 1-2-3, which is the predecessor to Microsoft Excel, and I learned how to think in ways of columns and rows, and that was very helpful. And I became very adept at taking large, ugly data sets and breaking them down, and I still can do that fairly well. The last thing is, well, what can you get paid for? Where's their money, right? And so you combine these things of what you love, what are you good at, and what you can be paid for. So in my example, um, I love working with educators. I love education. I love this idea. Particularly love post-secondary education, just the college experience. I was a student affairs professional before I got into program evaluation and consulting. I'm good at data analysis. And then I found people came to me and said, hey, we're trying to evaluate this National Science Foundation program or this US Department of Education program. And we don't really understand how to do this program evaluation thing. And I learned it in my doctoral program as a grad assistant. And so one thing led to another, which led to another. And I started a consulting practice known as Goshen Consulting, and which I now co-own and co-run with my partner. So I found the intersection of the three circles. And so that's my hedgehog concept: loving education, data analysis, and getting paid to do primarily and overwhelmingly STEM education work, and often other times other things too, but definitely a lot of STEM. Now, I also think it's nice to move from this hedgehog concept, which is Jim Collins' idea, to this idea of ikigai, which is this Japanese concept of four pieces. So you've got the three things of what you love, what you're good at, what you can get paid for. But I think this is a westernization of this philosophy, but I think it's good for us anyway, particularly since a lot of us serve social or governmental or nonprofit organizations. Oftentimes mission comes into this, and we often find ourselves having a mission to serve these folks over and above those other three things, which is, what does the world need? And so I like this idea of ikigai, which again, this is a westernization. I'm not sure the origins of ikigai would agree with this, but this is a Japanese combination of words between iki, which is life, and kai, which is meaning. And so I'd suggest you think about that intersection of the four circles, but the three is the way that we talk about with the hedgehog concept from Jim Collins. So let's take this. Oh, here's my idea. So I support educational organizations attempting to make the world a better place. I'm good at data analysis. There's the STEM piece. And then what the world needs is this evaluation firm that supports the educational initiatives. So the next concept from Jim Collins is this idea of a flywheel. He calls it the flywheel concept. So you've got the hedgehog concept and the flywheel concept. So once you've identified that thing you should be focused on, which is your niche, think about this as a flywheel. Now, so flywheels are technically mechanical devices in your engine, and it's a car thing, but I don't think I understand it. But I do understand Ferris wheels. Okay, so think about a flywheel as a Ferris wheel. Now, if the Ferris wheel, the Ferris wheel is your business, right? Just use this as a concept. And if the Ferris wheel spins, that's your business being productive. If it spins very slowly, it's getting started, or it's not very successful yet. If it's spinning faster, it's more successful. If it's spinning very fast, then you're very successful. So that's the idea. Now, to get a Ferris wheel to spin, you need to grab hold of like a basket, and then you just start to pull it down, but it's not going to go very fast at first. It's going to go very slow, but you got to keep showing up. You got to keep putting energy towards the flywheel or the Ferris wheel in this situation. If you pull it a second time, it's going to go a little bit faster. And if you just keep showing up, but you got to focus your energy. You can't walk off and get a cup of coffee. You got to keep focusing your energy. So in our examples with starting up independent consulting evaluation firms, right? You should pick a niche and keep showing up over and over again to where you need to be to keep that Ferris wheel continuing to go. Okay, I'm going to move before somebody gets a seizure from the spinning, and I apologize for that. So what we're doing is we're trying to isolate and focus our energy. So here's an example of a spyglass. But really, I think this is another good one, is oftentimes what I'm also trying to say is when you're first starting, if you're in the early stages of your consulting practice, if you don't have many projects or any projects, things are going to look pretty blurry. And with time, they're going to get a little more clear, which is from your left to your right. So I think it's fair to say you won't know what you love exactly. You know generally what you love. So you need to shoot kind of wide and far at first. And this is a process of time of narrowing. And then honestly, it's going to shift with time because, well, funding changes, as we all know, and we've seen over the past 2 years, and actually pretty much our entire careers, but definitely over the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of funding shift. And then we have to re-examine who we are and what we love and what we're good at and who we want to serve. So these things are shifting, but it comes into greater and greater clarity, particularly when you have projects that are repeating and you have clients that you particularly like and, well, clients that you don't want to work with anymore. You realize more and more about your niche and how that works. So Michael Michalowicz says the big, not so secret to finding your niche is to be really, really good at very, very little, which is the idea of, in this example, the more you can isolate and focus your energy, the better you're going to be at doing something very, very good. So lawyers are great examples. There are lawyers who get into extremely specific niche areas where there's a lot of money. And so I had some recent questions about an audit that I needed to do for not just the federal government, but for the Department of Defense. And I had questions about whether I should be doing it. And I reached out to some friends and I got connected to a lawyer who was very specifically understanding of the Department of Defense audits for for-profit organizations like myself. And this guy charged $1,800 per hour. And I went, what? And he says, oh, don't worry, I'll give you a discount. It'll only be $1,400 an hour. Like, I don't have that kind of money. Anyway, we figured it out, didn't need to use them, but it just was an example of how there are people out there that are so specific and obviously so profitable because they are very, very good at a very, very minute thing where there's a lot of opportunity for him to be this individual. He was the extreme expert in an extremely specific area, and he knew he didn't need to go any further. He didn't really need to negotiate his rates because people were willing to pay it because there was a lot of money in it. All right, so here's a couple more quotes for you. I like Warren Buffett a lot. It's about how you say no to almost everything. And I think we heard that just a little bit ago when we were talking about um, Ryan Holiday's keeping the main thing the main thing. Now, one of our colleagues who may be here, she shows up about half the time, Nikki Bowman, had this to say, and I think this is a quote from a New Directions for Evaluation. And if anybody knows Nikki, and if she's here, she'll be happy to tell you this herself. She's extremely focused on who she's there to serve as an Indigenous evaluator. And then, of course, we have keep the main thing from Ryan Holiday, which is a piece of my slides from before. But what does this look like in our daily life when people say things like, I know you're busy, but this may be a little bit outside of your focus, but particularly when we're in program evaluation, if we have a very specific idea for who we are and what we do, and somebody says, well, I know this isn't exactly your STEM program evaluation focus. It's this thing over here related to health education or something that's not what you do. You might want to say, this isn't the right thing for me. If you have a little extra time, can you help me with? This is actually a good reference for when people ask you to do things that are not in the contract and it's out of scope and you have scope creep. That could be a thing, that could be a problem, particularly if you're trying to be profitable. And there you go. I know it's not in the contract, but so this is also where we talk about boundaries, which I'm sure Becky will put her quote from or her book in the chat for us all about boundaries from Melissa. I'm forgetting her last name. Anyway, but
Urban.
getting back to, there you go, Melissa Urban. Thank you very much. And so it's probably in the chat about this time, or we'll find it for you. So here we are back at the original, well, my derivation of the hedgehog concept, which is the Ikigai hedgehog concept. And let's just remember how to say no from the Booker T. Washington perspective. And I want to leave with 5.5 questions for you to consider and for us to consider in our chat. What is the intersection of these circles for you? And maybe do these circles make sense to you? Do you like the addition of my fourth circle? When you identify a niche and you're focusing on that and to the exclusion of other things, how long do you wait it out? How long do you wait until you know that this is, am I willing to go without pay for a period of time? What do I take so I can just bide my time until I get to the thing I have to do? How does your niche change with time? And what are the opportunities that you say yes to? And what are the things that you say no to? And at the end of the day, how do you know that you have a good niche? And I think one of those ways would be, well, I'm still here doing this work, so something must be working. And then what does it look like to have a poor niche? All right. So those are questions for us to consider in a couple minutes when we stop the recording. I do want to point out some upcoming sessions next week. We have the subcontracting fair, which for those people who are live, I've already given you the link. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will probably have received something from Emily Johnson, which is the little ability to sign up. 2 weeks from now, we're going to have Becky talking about investments for independent consultants, not independent consultant investments, independent consultants who do investments in finance. And so she'll be talking about that. I'm going to have we'll have a panel discussion with Kurt and Jesse and perhaps others on subcontracting. So kind of a follow up to the February 12th session. And you can see the rest of these. I am particularly excited. I saw Emma's here about her session on Mommy Has to Work, balancing the joys and responsibilities of caregiving with independent consulting. So that should be a fun one too. One I can only sympathize with and not empathize with, but I certainly am interested. And I know a lot of you guys will be interested in that too. All right, with that, I'm going to stop the recording and I'll stop the AI. And so if you're out there in YouTube land, I'll see you later. But everybody else who's live, stick around.